earlier, welcome to the webinar for the GSMA Innovation Fund for Climate Resilience and Adaptation. My name is Nafisa Punjani, and I am a Senior Market Engagement Manager within the GSMA Innovation Fund. We are so incredibly thrilled to have so many of you interested and wanting to learn more about the fund. And we hope that the next hour that we spend together will be informative for you all, and that there are great takeaways that we leave you with. If we can just move over to the next slide. In terms of the session agenda, today you will be hearing from the Director of the GSMA Innovation Fund, Martin Karanja, who will introduce GSMA and who we are. We will then jump right into the Fund for Climate Resilience and Adaptation, where we will cover the objectives of the fund, why we emphasize the role of digital and mobile technology, and what we mean by adapt, absorb, and anticipate. We will then cover how to develop a strong pitch application, and we will then move into the Q&A section of the presentation, first by providing eligibility requirements and answering common frequently asked questions. And then we will end by opening up the chat to you and answering your questions. If we can just move to slide 3. So with that, in terms of housekeeping note, due to the volume of participants, we have disabled video and your ability to unmute. So we want to make sure that this session is interactive for everyone. So please do use the chat function to type out your question. You'll see quick notes just on the slide on how to get to chat functionality. And you're welcome to type out your questions throughout today's presentation, and we will do our best to respond to questions. The session will also be recorded and posted on the GSMA Innovation Fund website. So in case you missed something, please rest assured that the recording will be made available to you later on. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Martin to share more about the GSMA and who we are as an organization.
Thank you so much, Nafisa. Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Karanja. I'm a director for the GSMA Innovation Fund. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you all, and we hope that this 1 hour will be interactive. And we hope that we'll be able to answer your questions, and we'll look forward to getting your applications for the Innovation Fund, where we are focusing on climate resilience and adaptation. So just an overview of the GSMA. So GSMA is an industry association for mobile operators globally. So we represent the interest of mobile operators across the globe, with over 750 members, mobile operators, and 400 other companies within the telco and within the telco industry across the world. We are spread across different countries in terms of regional representation. So we have 12 offices countrywide. Through the different activities we've had, or through the different initiatives within the GSMA, we've been able to impact 93.8 million people. This specifically to speaking to mobile for development. And in essence, within mobile for development, we have over 10 years of experience of running innovation funds from different sectors across the spectrum, and our approach has been mainly to fund projects that have a clear social economic impact and commercially sustainable, in addition to having the huge potential to reach users. So by and large, if you look at the GSMA, we've been working with different experts across the industry. That's about 23,000. And in addition to that, the mobile industry currently has over 10.1 billion connections globally. I'd like to move to the next slide. Sorry, Nafisa, can I move to the next slide? All right. So as I mentioned earlier, we've had the GSMA Mobile for Development has over 10 years of experience of running innovation funds. We've been able to drive innovation across low middle income countries with the main aim of leveraging digital technology to reduce inequalities in our world. We've been working with mobile operators and also very close partners, in this case, donors. In particular, we're quite grateful to the likes of UK Aid, Australian Aid. We've also worked closely with Bill and Melinda Gates. We've worked with CEDA, GIZ, amongst others that are listed on the slide. If we can move to the next slide, so that I give you an overview of what we're doing within this particular round of Innovation Fund. So in the last close to 2 years, we've focused on different topics. So we've launched 3 rounds already, and now this 4th one looking at climate resilience and adaptation. So in essence, the first round, which was early last year, looked at mobile internet adoption and digital inclusion, and we're looking at digital inclusion barriers, and such as affordability, accessibility, digital skills, safety and security. The mainly, the main barriers towards driving digital inclusion. In addition, we also launched a round in focusing on assistive tech, where we're looking at how we can leverage the power of mobile or digital solutions to roll out solutions that drive digital inclusion for people with different disabilities. And just to mention, in these 2 rounds, the first round we selected nine startups, and this particular second round we selected 4, and this portfolio is currently operational and running the projects across multiple countries in Africa and Asia. Just to mention, the 3rd round, which we recently finalized the selection, which was focusing on digital urban services, of course, focusing on services that have a strong social-economic, environmental, and climate impact. And our main focus was on energy, water, sanitation, plastics, and waste management. Now, going to round 4, which is why we have this webinar today. The main focus here is on climate resilience and adaptation, and we'll be supporting innovations that will be focusing on these 2 elements across middle and low income countries across Africa, Asia, South and sorry, let me take that again. So Africa, South and Southeast Asia, the Caribbean, and select markets in LATAM and East European. Let's move to the next slide. This should be my final slide before I hand over to Julep. So just quickly, we are looking for essentially, we're looking for how digital solutions can help address issues of climate resilience and adaptation. And in essence, climate impacts are already evident across the world, and all of us have experienced these impacts in one way or the other. And as you all know, global leaders, experts, and academics are working very closely and earlier in November, we had COP26 in Glasgow, and this was an effort of bringing together multiple stakeholders towards addressing issues around climate resilience and adaptation. So we also have a report that was published in August this year. That's the IPCC AR6 report. which was focusing on the widespread social, economic, and environmental changes posed by the climatic conditions that keep changing across the world. And this report also highlighted these challenges, and they could be in the form of extreme temperature fluctuations, sea level rise, loss of biodiversity ecosystems, loss of biodiversity, ecosystems being destabilized, and imposing heavy risks to health, livelihoods, food security, water supply, human security, and economic growth. Unfortunately, it's also evident that all these impacts are maximized with social economic vulnerabilities in low middle income countries across the world. And through this particular round of Innovation Fund, we we want to identify digital solutions that would help these vulnerable communities to in select markets to be more resilient and adapt to these climatic changes. And as we've seen in other previous rounds, the other rounds of Innovation Fund, we are confident that we will be able to get numerous innovations with commercially sustainable models where we could showcase the role of digital technology in building resilience and resilience in vulnerable communities again. At this point, I'll hand over to my colleague Julip from our climate tech team, who will provide more insights into the Innovation Fund and the type of applications that we might want, or rather, type of applications or proposals we want to see in this round. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Martin. And very quickly, my name is Tulip Tilakaratna. I lead market engagement for the Climate Tech team and support our Innovation Fund team very much for this round. So I thought of starting off with a short video so that the video will do half of my job. Here we go.
Even as the global community works to limit global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius, the effects of climate change are unavoidable. Low-income and vulnerable communities continue to be the most affected and are the least prepared to adapt. Mobile technologies and other digital solutions can help create a more resilient future where communities not only survive climate shocks, but thrive in spite of them. Are you a startup, SME, or social enterprise based in Africa, Asia Pacific, the Caribbean, Latin America, or Eastern Europe? Are you leveraging digital technology to deliver climate resilience and adaptation solutions with socio-economic and commercial impact to low-income and vulnerable populations? Are you helping individuals or communities adapt to long-term and future climate change risks, anticipate and reduce the impact of climate hazards and extremes, and absorb and manage adverse conditions, emergencies or disasters, and aid recovery? We can support you to launch new products, services, and business models, scale up existing products or services, and expand into new markets. We provide grant funding of £100,000 and £250,000 to support projects over 15 to 18 months, requiring 25 to 50% match funding. Plus, mentoring and expert advice, networking and showcasing opportunities, facilitating relevant partnerships, and monitoring and evaluation support. Find out more and apply now at gsma.com/climate fund.
Hope the video provided you with a good overview of the fund. And in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk through a little bit about on the theory side of this fund, if you can call it that. So just to walk you through some of the thinking behind it and some of the areas we might like to see for the fund. So specifically, one of the key challenges we had at the beginning was to define climate resilience and adaptation. And as you would know from various stakeholders, we heard that these definitions are very interlinked and there are so many other aspects to it. So ultimately, we decided to go for a slightly different approach and looked at the 3 A's theory that's been published with the BRACE program that looks at building 3 types of different capacities. That would be adaptive capacity, anticipatory capacity, and the absorptive capacity of a community that's of a vulnerable community. So basically, from this fund, what we are trying to do is to, first of all, find innovative digital technology solutions that look at increasing the capacity of a low income or a vulnerable community to adapt, to anticipate, and to absorb climate related shock or stresses. So while doing that, we also want to see if there's a specific business model or a partnership model that will relate to this. And additionally, how we could generate some social impact, socio-economic and commercial impact. Additionally, also cover environmental and climate impact as well. And within all this, with the digital role, we want to understand what role can mobile operators in the market play and how can they support, how can that partnership be sustainable as well. So in doing this, what we try to do is try and identify what sort of examples or projects we might see in this initiative. And in doing that, we have mapped out these 5 examples. Please note the disclaimer at the very top. So this is not a restrictive list. These are not the only projects we might see. I'll start with that. So we are trying to look at, we are possibly expecting projects that enhance livelihoods of people, pay-as-you-go farming equipment or digital marketplaces or examples like that. That's linked to resilience. Resilient households and cities, where we could look at, for example, reduce food waste or water management solutions or urban resilience planning solutions, projects like that. And where a lot of people reached out to us with some sort of examples like early warning systems or real-time flood monitoring systems that bring climate hazard information and advice for people. Nature-based solutions, which might include forest management and restoration of payments or ecosystem services, which all are related to resilience in some way. And finally, we might also see some projects that link around digital insurance solutions or other financial services that might most likely be linked to the absorptive capability that we are talking about here. So these are a few examples of projects that we might expect in this round. And knowing that you might want to hear from us, like what sort of projects or what sort of answers we want to see in your when you do the concept notes, what I thought to do is spend about 10 minutes time walking through some of the very common answers or areas that we might really like to see in your applications. So first of all, I like to focus on the target. So we would really like to understand from you, who would you specifically like to target as or who will use this solution or who will benefit from this solution, and also know why this population is identified as vulnerable. And if you can provide as much information about this population, where it's based, and what types of climate risks they are prone to, that would help us to identify and place this community in our climate map and say, oh, so this is why this organization wants to fund or support them with a specific solution. And in all cases, make sure that you provide as much as evidence as possible, right? So you can, if there's any research on this, or if there's any recent reports or articles that you can share, feel free to provide those links, which would help us to again understand this context a little bit more. And additionally, we also want to see how climate change impacts this community and what are the vulnerabilities. So you can explain to us ways in which this population is impacted. Is it their lifestyle that's impacted? For example, this community might be a fisheries-based community, and recent biodiversity loss of the coastal area related to climate change related changes. The fisheries production is low. That might be one angle that you might provide. I'm just giving examples. Also highlight the severity and the time sensitivity of the threat as well. So when I talk about time sensitivity, that is, how are they already experiencing this? Is this something seasonal, or would it happen in 3 years' time, or is it an imminent risk and it's unpredictable? So just to highlight that time sensitivity factor would be very important. And another area is when we talk about vulnerability, we want to see why this population is less capable or less able to adapt or cope. Is there any political, social, economical reasons that make this specific population more at risk? So all these things would help us again to get the great like local context and understand, oh, so this is the challenge they have. And while you're thinking about your solution, it's really important for you to focus on the systemic challenges. So when I say systemic challenges, it could be related to some sort of political challenges, or it could be on regulatory environment. For example, if you're providing a drone solution, would you need a license or a drone pilot or a trained drone pilot? Is there a process for that? Think through that. Would you need to bring the equipment from another country? Would there be customs regulations around that? So think through that and highlight some of these risks or areas in that. Your understanding about these solutions and systemic challenges would be very important for us as well. And when we talk about the vulnerable population, it's also important to know some of the systemic challenges, like, for example, what's the pandemic situation there? Of course, we all know it's very unpredictable. A new variety might come in as it's now, and changes might happen overnight, but still highlighting some of the challenges on digital literacy, for example. You might have a solution, but people are not very digitally literate, and you might need to have training programs because of that. There might be security concerns in the population. So think through all this. And while thinking through this, you can then articulate how your solution addresses the vulnerabilities you highlighted earlier, to say how this specific solution will make this person more resilient, right? And when you are writing that, you can then think of the 3 A's and say, okay, this might make the person more adaptive, so the change can come and they are now adapted to that. Or before the change comes, they can anticipate it. Or maybe although this change happens, they are now they are able to absorb that change, brace for the impact, and move forward. So that's what we want to see when you talk about your solution. And try to highlight how you want to scale it or replicate it and generate learning from it. You might see in the very first line when we talk about the Innovation Fund, we say we want to gather insights and learning so that we could find replicable opportunities. So that's very important for us. And more importantly, how is the vulnerable community going to access this? Is it going to be free of charge? Do they going to pay us amount for this? Is it going to be in the local language, or are you going to have a translatory service? So think of all this when you talk about your solution. And when you come to technology, make sure, of course, the easy way we see in many applications is they find a few flashy words like, blockchain or robotics or something like that, and flash that word a couple of times up and down in a proposal, which won't help. So try and see what specific technology you're proposing and how that technology is going to help your project. And we also want to understand how critical technology is for your proposal. For example, you might do a great project. Digital tech might not be a part of it at the moment. So as an afterthought, you might say, maybe this is something where we can add some digital tech. So if digital tech is not at the heart of the solution, sometimes that might be a challenge. So feel free to think through how you're going to use that. And additionally, how a mobile operator can support you and be part of your project. So when we talk about mobile operator support, we talk about partnerships. So think through what sort of partnerships. So your downstream partners, who are your partners that's going to be part of this project? What is their role? Are they going to implement some solution? Are they going to do some tests for you? Are they going to fund or do kind of financial support for this project? Or are they going to do some social engagement with the community? And also say what sort of relationship you already have. Do you have a MOU with them already? Are you in discussion? It's early stage. So that's very important for us to, again, understand. And finally, with your project, try to think through very clearly what you want to achieve at the end of the day, right? So first of all, think through the desired outcomes. Are you going to impact 20,000 people in this community? Is that your outcome? Or are you going to test this solution and find that this solution makes the community resilient, or prove that? So very clearly think through the impact, and then importantly understand, how do you measure it, right? How are you going to measure it? Are you going to measure it from the beginning, from day one? Are you going to have some system implemented there? So talk through how you're going to measure and achieve and prove that you achieve this impact. And finally, at the end of the 15 or 18 months, where are you going to be, right? Is the solution going to be sustainable? Or are you thinking of mapping it out for the next couple of years? What's the sustainability journey for this project? And it's really important for us to understand how you thought through. Of course, this is the early stage. You might be still just thinking of the concept of this. But even in that, we want to see at early stage how you map out, how you think through. So basically, in summary, what we want you to show us is how well you thought through your project, how well you looked at the local challenges and the vulnerability, and how your project addresses these and how you cover these areas. So I know I spoke for 16, 17 minutes nonstop, but what we'll try to do is try and save some minutes at the end for Q&A, where you have very specific questions which we could answer. And without taking much time from you, I will hand over to Leo, my colleague, who will walk you through. He's from the Innovation Fund team, walk you through the eligibility criteria and lead you to Q&As. Over to you, Leo.
Thank you very much, Dilip, for that comprehensive overview. So as Dilip has mentioned, my name is Leo, and I work in the GSMA Innovation Fund based in Nairobi, Kenya. So we really hope to see very exciting pitches and applications in this fund. For this session, I will cover eligibility. So can we please move to the next slide? So this is an overview of the eligibility criteria of the fund. It's a general summary, and you will really need to get more in-depth details on our terms and conditions and frequently asked questions. So we'll post this in the chat at some point for you to just have more deeper level detail. So to start, so who is eligible? And I've already seen some questions. I've already come on that. So who is eligible? Which type of organizations do we fund? We fund startups, small to medium-sized private sector companies, and social enterprises. These organizations need to demonstrate the long-term sustainability and scalability of the innovation beyond the life of the grant. So we need to see some commercial sustainability elements. And then these organizations must also have active users and revenue in at least one eligible market. So active users and revenue is something that we really look forward to. The fund does not fund the following types of organizations: governments, including appointed government agencies. We do not fund mobile operators, university and academic organizations, and we also do not fund startup accelerators and incubators. However, we highly encourage partnerships with these entities. In terms of geography, the fund is open to the following geographies, and Martin had talked about this, so I'll go through them again: Africa, South and Southeast Asia, Pacific Islands, the Caribbean, Latin America, that's limited to Bolivia, Colombia, and Guatemala, and then lastly, Eastern Europe and Western Balkans, which is limited to Albania and Moldova. It's also important to note that there are some countries in these regions that are excluded, and therefore you will need to check again the terms and conditions to see specifics. These are linked to an ODA list there that you can be able to cross-reference and check if your country is eligible for funding. So you can move to the next slide. So in terms of match contribution, this is mandatory for this fund. And there are two key guidelines here. If you request for grant funds between £100,000 and £150,000, you must provide matching contribution of at least 25%. If you request above that, which is £150,001 to £250,000, you will need to provide 50% as match funds. When is this match contribution required? So this must be secured and evidenced by the time of the final proposals when this is being submitted, and this must be used during the project in the 15 or 18 month. The final proposals are due in May. So that's when we require you to submit full evidence. Next slide, please. So what support do we provide to the selected or successful grantees? So I'll just run through this quickly. So we provide grant funding in pounds of between 100,000 to 250,000 for projects that run between 15 and 18 months. We also have boot camps, which are expert-led sessions and targeted networking. We also have a series of themed clinics on topics such as human-centered design, product development, and other topics. There is learning exchange opportunities with fellow grantees and networking opportunities with partners such as the recently launched ARA, Adaptation Research Alliance. We also provide M&E support. We also do a lot of facilitation of relationships and partnerships with mobile operators. This is building synergies between you as startups and mobile operators to achieve scale and impact. And finally, there is the opportunity to increase and raise your profile to potential investors and new partners through GSMA's various platforms and publications. This can also include events such as Mobile World Congress in Africa and Barcelona. So on the next slide, I will talk about just what's coming next in terms of the timelines and key dates of the fund. So the fund was announced and opened during COP26 on November 9th. Applicants have been submitting their pitches through an online portal. This online portal, the link for that is also in our landing page, so please look at that. All pitches need to be submitted by 9th January. This is when the online portal will be closed. So there's a deadline there between 9th of November and 9th of January. In February, the successful organizations will be shortlisted. So we'll shortlist these applicants and invite them to submit a full project proposal. This includes a project proposal which has project specifics, an implementation plan, which includes a work plan, and a budget, which outlays how the funds are going to be spent. The next stage after that is in June. In June, an independent panel of experts will appraise the completed proposals as well as recommendations from GSMA and the fund manager and make a decision on whether to fund or not to fund. So that's when the decision will be made. After that, selected grantees will be notified. There will be contracting, and finally, in September of 2022, we expect the projects to commence. So that's an overview of the Innovation Fund key dates. Again, I just have to emphasize that the terms and conditions and the frequently asked questions provide all this information in detail. Please read through. If you have any additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to the GSMA team. So the next section is on Q&A. I'll invite Julep back just in case there are any other questions. So many questions have been asked already. We'll see if there are any that are unanswered or any that we need to provide additional information. So I'll start from the top, which is the first question is, can a consortium be formed between NGOs and local startups? So I think an answer has been provided on that. We do not allow consortiums. Only one organization can apply for funding and become a grantee. However, as I've mentioned, we highly encourage partnerships with these other types of organizations. We encourage partnerships with mobile operators, governments, local community-based organizations that help the startup really achieve impact on the ground, and accelerators and incubators. So those are not allowed to be the lead applicant, but we highly encourage partnerships with them. There are some questions on countries. As I mentioned, there's in the terms and conditions, there's a clear section on that. we've listed all the countries. This is section 3 of the terms and conditions. We've listed the countries on which projects can be implemented, and we've also provided a link on countries which can receive official development assistance. So you need to cross-check on that. Also to add for geography, there's going to be additional due diligence checks and eligibility screenings in certain markets. So please have a look at that. Dulip, have you seen any question that's related to more of the types of projects or the solutions as I run through this?
Not exactly. I'm looking through. If anyone in the group feels your question wasn't answered on chat, you can repost it for us, please, so we could see as well. So on Asia, I might answer the last one. So it's South Asia and Southeast Asia are the regions from Asia that's eligible, and you could look at the attached file on the terms and conditions to see whether these countries are eligible, and specifically those are the 2 regions. I think there's a question came just now, which was answered earlier by our colleague Martin on the number of projects. So we won't have a specific number, but it would be between 10 to 20.
There's another one in which it says, does the startup need to be registered in the target countries? That would be our preference. But if you go to section 2 of the terms and conditions, the second paragraph, it states that you need to be an entity registered operating in the country of project implementation. In cases where responsibility of the service lies with the downstream partner rather than the applicant, it may be acceptable for the applicant to be registered in a country other than that of project implementation. So all the information is provided in the terms and conditions. Can the match funding be from another donor? The answer is yes, the match funding can be from another donor, but we shall be checking for additionality on some of the donor funds that come from, sorry, not checking for additionality. If you've received a past grant from FCDO or CEDA, we will be checking for additionality, but the match funds can't come from the current donors for this fund, which is FCDO or CEDA. I'm looking for other questions. I think Apostle's question, I've just answered that. So Lang Ralph has a question, just to be sure, applying for 250,000 funding, adding in kind of 125,000. So the overall sum is 375,000, is it correct? Or would the share of the fund be cut down to 125,000 plus 125,000 in kind to add up to 250,000? So if I get your question correctly, if you're applying for 250,000, you will be required to contribute match funds of half of that. So that would be 125,000. the total project, which is both grant and match, will therefore be 375,000 and not the second option that you've just posted. So it will be an addition of both. I hope that clarifies. I'm still going up. Wagma Farid has a question on project maturity. How mature does should the product be in order to apply for the fund? So GSMA will assess all stages of product development, but preference or strong applications will be those that have projects or solutions that have been successfully piloted, tested with users, and have revenue. When it comes to hardware, applicants need to show that these hardware components have been sufficiently tested, deployed in the field, and rolled out to users with positive or good results. So that's how I would answer that, Wagma. Hopefully that is addressed.
Leo, I'll jump in with a question that came from Adrian Harris. Interesting one and a tricky one. So if the mobile innovation is one part of a larger project, will an application will be still considered? So as I mentioned, we want to see how crucial the mobile innovation is for the project, right? So basically to understand what role mobile innovation plays. Of course, the project could be large and doing other things, but the contribution of mobile technology to achieve that objective is what we see. So there you go. So if it's absolutely crucial, then it's absolutely relevant.
Simon and Mohammed have similar questions on submissions. So I'm just going to try and answer this in terms of the number of submissions. And this is also in the FAQs. So multiple submissions for the same project are not permitted. In cases where this occurs, the first submission will be reviewed if it's eligible, and all duplicate submissions will be deemed ineligible and not reviewed. And then applications for different projects from the same organization are allowed. Although we do not encourage this approach, you must demonstrate and consider how you spend your own resources through this process, and if you're able to support the application of more than one proposal. So that's how I would answer the couple of questions focused on submissions. I think I've answered this. There's a long one that Taita teach can previously paid expenses incurred 3 months before the commencement of the GSMA project be used as matching funds. So the terms and conditions are very clear on this. These matching funds must be incurred during the life cycle of the project, so the 15 to 18 months after project commencement or contract execution. In what time scale is the funds given in an 18-month project? I'm not sure I completely understand, but the lowest number of months we give is 15 months, and the highest is 18 months. So you have to be within that window. I'm still reading through some of this. How many projects are you financing? I think, Tulip, you covered that. So, more specific question, we are a mobility building electric bicycles and building electric bicycles and leveraging the power of the smartphone to enhance the feature capabilities of what the bike offers. Is this an eligible startup for this fund? Tulip, do you want to take that?
Sorry, Leo, mobility building, that one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just about to answer the one after, but I'll read that while I answer this. Sorry. So the Vijay, your question, it's not mandatory to have the MNO partnership, but as you say, to have a clarity on how the MNO could be a partner at some point and joining the project or contribute to the project in some way. Give me a second to read this properly while Leo, if you want to take another one quickly, I can answer in a second.
Yeah, I wanted to just add on that in terms of the potential solutions, as Tulip mentioned in his presentation, the list that was provided is not an exhaustive list. We are open to all types of solutions and projects, but the main thing here is that they need to address the objectives of the fund and show that they are solving the 3 A's, adapt, anticipate, and absorb. So that should be, and obviously the eligibility criteria. So that should be the metric that you use to assess whether you're actually a good fit for this fund.
Sure. Thanks, Leo. And then on the mobility, so first of all, I feel it might be good to have a little bit more detail on the specific, but I'll try to make a couple of assumptions and answers. So the key, as I mentioned, is to say how this specific solution helps a community to build resilience against a vulnerability that they already have or might have in the next year or so, right? So if you can explain that from this solution, that should be fine. However, on specific use of electric bikes or renewable energy solutions, you have to think of it whether it's pure mitigation project, whether the project just reduces the contribution to the climate change only. If that's the case, then that project will not be eligible. So a project could have a mitigation angle and have a resilience angle as well. If then that is eligible, but it's purely presented from a mitigation angle, then that won't cover. So that's why when I presented, I highlighted the importance of sharing how this contributes to addressing a vulnerable population's challenge. So I see the final question on, is it okay if we operate in 2 eligible countries? Absolutely okay for you to operate in the 2 countries. So it would depend on which country your application is before. And I could also link to a question that came earlier from Apostolus. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly. So where the TOR, it states that if the responsibility of the service delivery lies within a downstream partner rather than the applicant, for example, the service delivery is by a local government, it may be acceptable in certain cases to be registered in a different country. So for example, say, I'll take the same example where you are based in Malaysia and Thailand, which and you might be proposing a solution for Indonesia, right? I'm just thinking out loud, right? And so in that case, right, if the entire solution is kind of delivered by your service partner in Indonesia, and you can show how this works and what sort of arrangement is there, and your in that case we might be able to accept that, is what's highlighted in the TOR. However, why it's a little complicated, there are certain number of countries in section 3 that's highlighted where we really, it's a must to have a in-country registration. So it's a little complex, but hopefully I clarified your question. So Malaysia and Thailand is fine, but depends on where the project is.
Thanks, Tulip. So we have only 3 minutes left. So I suggest maybe we can close the session and move to the next slide. Tulip, happy to hand over this to you.
Sure, thank you. So thanks very much for your active participation. Apologies if we are a little slow in responding. Hopefully we responded to all your questions. In case there were questions that weren't answered, we will answer them in the follow-up email that we sent across to you. And also, as Nafisa highlighted earlier, we will share the recording of this webinar also online, so you should be able to access that as well. Again, guiding you towards the key documents or the links so you can access them. There is a frequently asked questions section which we have. So most of the questions, or rather few of the questions asked today, we have already answered there, so you could access it there. If there is a very complex question you need to ask with a lot of details highlighting which wasn't, you feel, covered sufficiently today in the webinar as well, feel free to write to us on the email address we've highlighted here. So last but not least, in the last 2 minutes, I think I should give a big thank you to our donors who made this all possible. This specific round is funded as a partnership between UK government and the Swedish government. So a huge thank you for them for making this happen and their interest and the prioritization of this crucial topic. Having said that, we encourage you to remember the date, that is the 9th of January, midnight. So would be the very strict deadline. So make sure you submit all your applications in time, and we want to see very interesting projects for this round going forward. So thanks very much all for joining us today. Have a wonderful day and best of luck.